In the misty halls of Blackthorn Manor, a violin's haunting melody falls silent as the world-renowned Madame Alina Varkova vanishes mid-concert, only to be found dead in a locked attic, a poisoned wineglass by her side. Hercule Poirot, with his razor-sharp mind, unravels a web of envy, love, and betrayal. Was it the rival musician, consumed by jealousy, the scorned lover, nursing a broken heart, or the quiet doctor, hiding secrets in her notebook? As clues like a stray lint and a scratched doorframe emerge, Poirot reveals a chilling truth. One guest's hatred orchestrated a perfect murder, but no crime escapes the little gray cells. Chapter 1. The Invitation to Blackthorn Manor. The late afternoon sun cast a golden haze over the orderly desk of Hercule Poirot, its rays catching the polished silver of his letter opener as he sliced open an envelope with meticulous care. The invitation within, penned in an elegant hand, bore the crest of Sir Reginald Hawthorne, a man whose wealth from steel mills was matched only by his passion for the arts. It requested Poirot's presence at Blackthorn Manor, a secluded estate in the Yorkshire moors, for a private concert by the celebrated violinist, Madame Alina Varkova. The promise of her performance, a rare treat, was laced with a subtler allure. Sir Reginald's note hinted at tensions among his guests, a puzzle that piqued Poirot's curiosity. "Mon ami," he called to Captain Hastings, who was idly flipping through a newspaper in the armchair by the fire. "What say you to a weekend in the country? Music, perhaps, and mischief, most certainly." Hastings, ever eager for adventure, leaped at the idea, his boyish enthusiasm undimmed by years of Poirot's methodical ways. A concert, Poirot splendid. And this Varkovoshi's the talk of London, isn't she? I say, it'll be a fine change from your endless fussing over symmetry. Poirot's mustache twitched, but his eyes gleamed with amusement. He folded the invitation with precision and tucked it into his waistcoat. "The symmetry, Hastings, is in the mind, and I suspect this weekend will require all my little gray cells." The journey to Yorkshire was a study in contrasts. The rattling train gave way to a hired motor car that wound through mist-shrouded moors, where gnarled trees seemed to whisper secrets. Blackthorn Manor emerged from the fog like a spectre, its Gothic turrets piercing the sky, its stone walls cloaked in ivy that clung like a jealous lover. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and heather, and Poirot, stepping from the car, adjusted his hat against the chill. "Formidable," he murmured, his sharp gaze taking in the manor's imposing facade. Hastings, clutching his overcoat, shivered. "Rather grim, don't you think? Like something out of a Gothic novel?" Sir Reginald Hawthorne greeted them at the grand oak doors, his florid face flushed with pride and perhaps a touch of port. A stout man in his 50s, his tailored suit strained slightly at the waist, but his manners were impeccable. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, welcome," he boomed, ushering them into a hall adorned with tapestries and gleaming candelabras. "You honor us. Madame Varkova's performance tonight will be a triumph, I assure you." His enthusiasm was infectious, yet Poirot noted a flicker of unease in his eyes, as if the evening held more than music. The guests were assembled in the drawing room, a cavernous space with velvet drapes and a roaring fire. Sir Reginald introduced them with a flourish, his voice betraying a host's delight in his curated company. First was Madame Alina Varkova herself, a woman of striking presence. Her dark hair swept into an elegant chignon, her eyes deep and shadowed with a melancholy that seemed to linger like a minor chord. She inclined her head gracefully, her voice soft with a Russian accent. "Monsieur Poirot, I have heard of your genius. I hope you enjoy my music." Her smile was fleeting, her fingers tracing the edge of a locket at her throat. Next was Mr. Julian Trent, a violinist, whose star had dimmed in Varkova's ascendance. Lean and angular, with a thin mouth that curled into a smile more akin to a grimace. He shook Poirot's hand with a grip too tight to be cordial. "A pleasure. I'm sure," he said, his tone clipped, his eyes darting to Varkova with ill-concealed resentment. Poirot's keen observation caught the faint tremor in Trent's hand, a sign of nerves, or perhaps something darker. Miss Clara Beaumont, a young heiress with porcelain skin and auburn curls, stood apart, her posture rigid. Her emerald gown was exquisite, yet her expression was one of restrained storm. Her blue eyes fixed on Varkova with an intensity that spoke of unspoken history. "Monsieur Poirot," she said coolly, her voice betraying a trace of bitterness, "I trust you'll find the evening enlightening." Poirot bowed, noting the faint flush on her cheeks. Last was Dr. Evelyn Marsh, a woman of quiet authority, her spectacles glinting in the firelight. A physician by trade, she had a scholarly air, her hands clasped around a small notebook. "I'm merely a guest with an interest in observation," she said, her smile reserved but genuine. Poirot sensed a mind as analytical as his own, though her reticence suggested secrets of her own, as the group dispersed to dress for dinner. Poirot lingered by the fire, his fingers steepled. "Hastings," he said softly, "observe the undercurrents. Envy, love, ambition, they are here, like notes in a symphony. And I, Hercule Poirot, shall listen closely." Hastings chuckled, but his friend's words lingered, a prelude to the mystery that awaited in the shadowed halls of Blackthorn Manor. Chapter 2. The concert's discord. The music room at Blackthorn Manor was a sanctuary of elegance, its high ceiling adorned with a fresco of cherubs playing lyres, their painted faces glowing faintly in the flicker of a dozen candelabras. The walls, paneled in dark oak, absorbed the light, lending an intimate hush to the space, as though the room itself held its breath in anticipation. Rows of velvet-holstered chairs faced a small stage, where a single chair and music stand awaited. Madame Alina Hercule Poirot, seated in the second row beside Captain Hastings, adjusted his cuffs, his sharp eyes not on the stage, but on the assembly of guests. Each a note in the complex score of human motives he was beginning to discern. Hastings, ever the enthusiast, leaned forward, his program clutched eagerly. "I say, Poirot, this is the life. A private concert by Varkova herself. They say her Tchaikovsky is unmatched." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing beneath it. "Oui, mon ami, but it is not the music that interests me most. Observe the audience, Hastings. The heart of a mystery often beats in the silences between notes." Hastings chuckled, accustomed to his friend's cryptic pronouncements, and settled back, oblivious to the undercurrents. Poirot sensed the room filled slowly, the guests drifting in with the rustle of silk and the clink of cufflinks. Sir Reginald Hawthorne, resplendent in a burgundy dinner jacket, took his place in the front row, his broad face beaming with proprietary pride. Beside him sat Miss Clara Beaumont, her auburn curls catching the candlelight, her expression a mask of cool detachment, though her fingers twisted a lace handkerchief with subtle agitation. Mr. Julian Trent entered next, his lean frame stiff, in a tailored suit, his eyes darting to the stage with a mixture of anticipation and something sharper envy, perhaps, or resentment. Dr. Evelyn Marsh, in a simple gray gown, chose a seat near the back, her notebook open on her lap, her pen poised as if to capture more than mere musical notes. The servants, discreet in their black uniforms, stood at the edges, their faces impassive but their eyes alert. At precisely 8 o'clock, Madame Alina Varkova appeared, a vision in a gown of midnight blue that shimmered like starlight. Her dark hair was swept up, a single sapphire pin glinting at her temple, and her violin rested lightly in her hands, as natural an extension of her as her own breath. The room fell silent, the air charged with expectation. She offered a small, enigmatic smile, her dark eyes sweeping the audience, lingering briefly on Clara, then on Trent, before settling on the music stand. Without a word, she raised her bow, and the first notes of Tchaikovsky's Valscherzo filled the room. The music was transcendent, a cascade of longing and fire that seemed to pull the very soul from the listeners. Even Poirot, whose appreciation for music was secondary to his love of order, felt a stirring at the purity of her skill. The violin sang, now delicate as a whisper, now fierce as a storm, weaving a spell that held the room captive. Hastings, enraptured, forgot his usual fidgeting, while Sir Reginald's eyes shone with tears of awe. But Poirot's gaze was elsewhere. Noting the subtle shifts in the audience's demeanor, Clara Beaumont's hand stilled, her handkerchief forgotten. But her eyes never left Varkova, their intensity betraying a depth of emotion, love, perhaps, or its bitter aftermath. Trent's fingers, resting on his knees, twitched rhythmically, as if tracing the notes he could not play, his jaw tight with suppressed feeling. Dr. Marsh's pen moved steadily, her face unreadable, though Poirot caught a fleeting glance she cast toward Trent, sharp and calculating. Sir Reginald, lost in the music, seemed oblivious to the tensions around him, but Poirot noted the way his hands clasped and unclasped, a nervous habit that belied his outward calm. Halfway through the piece, Varkova paused, her bow hovering above the strings. A murmur rippled through the room as she lowered her violin, her face pale. "Forgive me," she said, her voice soft but clear, carrying the faintest trace of her Russian accent. "I require a moment of air. The warmth, it is overwhelming." She inclined her head, a gesture of apology, and stepped off the stage, disappearing through a side door that led to the manor's inner corridors. The guests stirred, whispers breaking the spell of the music. Sir Reginald rose, his smile strained. "A brief intermission, ladies and gentlemen. Madame Varkova will return shortly." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his mind already at work. "Q," he murmured, tapping his fingers lightly on the arm of his chair. Why does a performer of such caliber interrupt her own triumph? Hastings, ever practical, shrugged. "A bit of nerves, perhaps. Or the room is rather stuffy." Poirot shook his head. "Nan, Hastings. The little gray cells, they protest. There is more here than a need for air." The intermission stretched longer than expected. Guests milled about, their conversations a low hum of speculation. Sir Reginald, ever the solicitous host, sent a servant to check on Varkova, but the girl returned with a puzzled expression, reporting that the violinist could not be found in the nearby rooms. Clara Beaumont stood by a window, her back to the room, her posture rigid as if guarding a secret. Trent, sipping a glass of sherry, made a show of nonchalance, but his eyes darted to the door through which Varkova had vanished. Dr. Marsh closed her notebook with a snap, her gaze flickering between the other guests. As if piecing together a puzzle of her own, Poirot rose, his movements deliberate, and approached Sir Reginald, who was wringing his hands by the fireplace. "Monsieur, is it customary for your star performer to vanish mid-concert?" he asked, his tone mild but his eyes piercing. Sir Reginald flushed, his joviality fading. "Most irregular, Monsieur Poirot. Alana Madame Varkova's a professional. She has never done this before. I assure you, she must be indisposed." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Perhaps, but I would like to see the corridor, where she went. The layout of the manor, it interests me." Sir Reginald, flustered but obliging, led Poirot and Hastings to the side door, which opened onto a narrow hallway lined with portraits of stern-faced hawthorns. The corridor branched in 3 directions, one to the gardens, one to the main hall, and a third to a staircase ascending to the upper floors. Poirot examined the floor, noting the faint scuff of a woman's shoe in the dust, leading toward the staircase. "She went this way," he said, his voice low. "But why? The gardens would provide air, not the upper rooms." Hastings, eager to be useful, suggested a search of the grounds, but Poirot raised a hand. None, mon ami. The answer lies within the manor. Let us wait, but let us also observe. They returned to the music room, where the guests had resumed their seats, though the atmosphere was now tinged with unease. Sir Reginald announced that Varkova had sent word she would return momentarily, and the concert resumed after a delay of nearly 20 minutes. Varkova reappeared, her composure restored, though Poirot noted a faint tremor in her hands as she lifted her violin. The second half of the Valscherzo was as brilliant as the first, but there was a new urgency in her playing, a feverish intensity that set the room on edge. When the final note faded, the applause was thunderous, yet Vark did not linger for her bow. She bowed once, briefly, and left the stage. Her violin clutched tightly as she vanished through the same side door. The guests rose, their chatter a mix of admiration and curiosity. Sir Reginald, beaming once more, invited everyone to the drawing room for refreshments. But Poirot lingered, his gaze fixed on the stage. She did not look well, Hastings, he said, and yet she played with the fire of one possessed. Why the haste to leave? Hastings frowned. Perhaps she is shy. Not everyone loves the spotlight. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Or perhaps, mon ami, the spotlight reveals too much. As the evening wore on, Varkova's absence grew conspicuous. Sir Reginald, now visibly anxious, sent servants to search the manor, from the sprawling gardens to the guest wings. The clock struck 11, then past, and still no sign of the violinist. The guests, gathered in the drawing room, grew restless. Clara Beaumont's face was pale, her hands clenched in her lap. Trent's nonchalance had given way to a nervous pacing, his fingers tapping a restless rhythm on his glass. Dr. Marsh, ever observant, watched the room with a clinical detachment, her notebook open once more. Poirot, standing by the mantel, sipped a tisane, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the mounting tension. He noted the way Clara avoided Trent's gaze, the way Trent's eyes lingered on the door, the way Dr. Marsh's pen paused when Sir Reginald mentioned Varkova's name. Something is amiss, Hastings, he whispered. The music has stopped, but the drama, it begins. At midnight, a piercing scream shattered the murmurs of the drawing room. It came from above, a raw, terrified sound that sent the guests to their feet. Sir Reginald, his face ashen, led the way, followed by Poirot, Hastings, and the others. The scream had come from a servant, a young maid named Elsie, who stood trembling at the foot of the attic stairs, her eyes wide with horror. "It's Madame Varkova," she stammered. She's in the attic, and oh, sir, she's dead." Poirot's expression hardened, his mind already racing. "Vite, Hastings. To the attic. The curtain has risen on our mystery." As they ascended the creaking stairs, the candlelit glow of Blackthorn Manor seemed to dim, the shadows closing in around the little Belgian detective, whose gray cells were now fully awake to the discord that had silenced the violinist's song. Chapter 3. The locked attic stairs of Blackthorn Manor groaned under the hurried tread of the assembled party, their shadows leaping grotesquely in the wavering light of the candles held aloft by Sir Reginald Hawthorne and the butler, Mr. Graves. Hercule Poirot ascended with measured steps, his patent leather shoes silent on the worn wood, his eyes alert to every detail of the narrow, dust-laden passage. Captain Hastings, close behind, muttered under his breath, his face flushed with a mixture of excitement and dread. "Good Lord, Poirot, a body in the attic. This is grim business." Poirot's mustache gave the faintest twitch. Grim, oui, mon ami, but also precise. A crime, it is like a puzzle, each piece must fit. At the top of the stairs, the maid Elsie stood trembling, her apron clutched in white-knuckled hands, her eyes fixed on the heavy oak door that barred the attic. "I only came up to fetch linens, sir," she stammered to Sir Reginald, her voice quivering. "The door was locked, but I had the spare key, and when I opened it, oh, sir, she's there, Madame Varkova, and she ain't moving. Sir Reginald, his florid face now pale, fumbled with the candle, its wax dripping onto his cuff. Locked, you say? But how? Poirot raised a hand, his voice calm but commanding. Permit me, monsieur. Let us see for ourselves. Mr. Graves produced a ring of keys, his hand steady despite the tension, and unlocked the door with a grating clunk. The hinges creaked as the door swung inward, revealing a cavernous attic, its sloping ceiling crisscrossed with beams heavy with cobwebs. The air was thick with the musty scent of old wood and forgotten relics. A single oil lamp, flickering on a crate, cast a feeble glow, illuminating the figure of Madame Alina Varkova, slumped in a high-backed chair at the room's center. Her violin lay at her feet, its polished wood gleaming faintly, and beside it, on a small table, stood a half-empty glass of red wine, its surface catching the light like a dark jewel. The guests crowded the doorway, their gasps and murmurs a chorus of shock. Clara Beaumont's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror, though Poirot noted a fleeting glint of something else, relief, perhaps, or resignation. Julian Trent stood rigid, his thin lips pressed into a line, his gaze fixed not on Varkova, but on the violin, as if it held some secret. Dr. Evelyn Marsh pushed forward, her spectacles glinting, her expression one of clinical focus. Let me through, she said briskly. I'm a physician. Poirot stepped aside, his eyes never leaving her, as she knelt beside the body. Dr. Marsh's examination was swift but thorough. She touched Varkova's wrist, then her neck, her fingers probing with practiced precision. She leaned close, her nose wrinkling slightly, and then straightened, her face grave. She's dead, she announced, her voice steady. Poison, I'd wager. There's a faint odor of almond cyanide, likely. The wine, perhaps. She gestured to the glass, careful not to touch it. Sir Reginald staggered, clutching the doorframe. Poison? In my house? Impossible. Trent's eyes flickered, and Clara's breath caught, but neither spoke. Poirot moved forward, his small frame commanding the room's attention. Do not touch anything, s'il vous plaît, he said, his tone gentle but firm. He knelt beside the chair, his eyes scanning the scene with the precision of a watchmaker. Varkova's face was serene in death, her dark eyes half open, her lips parted, as if in mid-breath. Her gown, the same midnight blue she had worn for the concert, was unrumpled, her hands folded loosely in her lap. The key to the attic door, an ornate iron piece, lay on the floor near her right hand, its position almost too perfect, as if placed rather than dropped. Poirot's gaze shifted to the floor. The dust, thick from years of neglect, bore only one set of footprints, Varkova's, marked by the delicate tread of her evening slippers, leading from the door to the chair. No other tracks disturbed the grime. He rose, his fingers brushing the edge of the table, and examined the wine glass. Its rim bore faint traces of lipstick, matching the shade on Varkova's lips, and its base was free of smudges, suggesting it had been held by one hand alone. Curio, he murmured, his eyes narrowing. A locked room, a single glass, a solitary death. And yet, the little gray cells, they protest. Hastings, hovering at his shoulder, could contain himself no longer. It's a locked room mystery, Poirot, like something out of a novel. She locked herself in, drank the poison, and well, that's that. Poirot turned, his expression one of patient indulgence. That, Hastings, is what the murderer wishes us to believe. But why does a woman of such brilliance come to this dusty attic to end her life? And why bring her violin, only to let it fall? He gestured to the instrument, its strings still taut, untouched by the dust. Poirot crossed to the attic's only window, a narrow slit high in the wall, its frame warped with age. The bolt was rusted shut, the glass thick with grime, unbroken. No exit here, he said, almost to himself. He returned to the door, examining the lock and frame with a magnifying glass produced from his waistcoat. The lock was old but functional, the key a perfect fit. Yet, near the base of the door, he paused, his lens catching a faint scratch in the wood, barely visible. He pocketed the glass, his face inscrutable, and picked up a small piece of lint from the floor near the table, tucking it into a handkerchief. With care, Sir Reginald, recovering his composure, cleared his throat. "Monsieur Poirot, we must summon the police. This is a tragedy, but surely a matter for the authorities." Poirot nodded, but his eyes were distant, already tracing the threads of the mystery. "Oui, monsieur, the police must come, but they will find what is obvious. Hercule Poirot, he seeks what is hidden." He turned to Dr. Marsh. "Madame, you are certain of cyanide?" She nodded, her gaze steady. "The odor is distinctive, and her symptoms rigidity, pallor-line. An autopsy will confirm it." Poirot addressed the group, his voice soft but commanding. "Until the police arrive, no one is to leave the manor. And this room, it remains untouched, comprenez-vous?" The guests nodded, their faces a gallery of emotions: fear, suspicion, grief. Clara's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but she said nothing. Trent's hands twitched, as if longing to hold his own violin. Dr. Marsh's notebook was open again, her pen scratching faintly. Sir Reginald, mopping his brow, muttered about the scandal this would bring. As the group descended to the drawing room, Poirot lingered, his gaze sweeping the attic once more. The lamp's flame flickered, casting Varkova's shadow across the beams, a ghostly echo of her presence. "You came here for a reason, madame," he said softly, as if addressing her. "And someone ensured you would not leave. But Poirot, he will find them." He turned, his steps brisk, and followed Hastings down the stairs. The lint in his pocket, a silent clue to the discord that had silenced the violinist's song. Chapter 4. The Suspects. Shadows. The drawing room of Blackthorn Manor was a stark contrast to the grim attic, its opulent warmth a facade over the chill of suspicion that now permeated the air. The fire crackled in the grand hearth, casting a ruddy glow on the faces of the assembled guests, who sat in uneasy silence, their eyes darting between one another and the door through which the police would soon arrive. Hercule Poirot stood by the mantel, his small, immaculate figure a beacon of calm amidst the storm of nerves. His hands were clasped behind his back, his head tilted slightly, as if listening to a melody only he could hear. Captain Hastings, perched on the edge of a settee, fidgeted with his watch chain, his brow furrowed. "I say, Poirot, this is a rum business. Poison in a locked attic. Who could have done it?" Poirot's eyes, bright and piercing, swept the room. "Patience, mon ami. The truth, it reveals itself in the shadows of human nature. We must observe, question, and listen." He turned to Sir Reginald Hawthorne, who stood by a decanter, pouring himself a generous brandy with trembling hands. "Monsieur Hawthorne, if you please, let us begin. Tell me of your guests, their histories, their connections to Madame Ver—" Sir Reginald, his florid face still pale from the shock, cleared his throat. "Alana, Madame Varkova was my guest of honor. A genius, unparalleled. I invited her to perform because her music, it elevates the soul. I cannot believe anyone here would wish her harm." His voice wavered, and he took a gulp of brandy, his eyes avoiding the others. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "And yet, monsieur, harm has been done. Tell me of the others." Sir Reginald gestured to Julian Trent, who leaned against a bookcase, his thin frame taut with suppressed energy. "Mr. Trent is a violinist of note, though perhaps not as celebrated as Alina. I thought a friendly rivalry might enliven the evening." Trent's lips curled into a sneer, and he spoke without looking up. "Friendly. She overshadowed me at every turn. Her so-called genius was half theatrics, half luck." His voice was sharp, cutting through the room like a bow across strings. Poirot's mustache twitched. You resented her success, monsieur. Trent's eyes flashed, but he composed himself quickly. Resent? I'm a professional. One compete. With skill, not spite. Yet his fingers drummed a restless rhythm on the bookcase, betraying his agitation. Poirot noted the gesture, filing it away like a card in his mental index. Next, Sir Reginald indicated Clara Beaumont, who sat rigidly in a high-backed chair, her auburn curls framing a face pale as porcelain. Miss Beaumont is an heiress, a patron of the arts. She and Alina were close once. Clara's eyes, a stormy blue, met Poirot's with a flicker of defiance. We were friends, she said, her voice low but steady. Our parting was not amicable, but I wished her no ill. Her fingers tightened on her handkerchief, and Poirot's sharp gaze caught the faint tremor in her hands. A lover scorned, mademoiselle, can harbor a wound deeper than friendship, he said gently, his tone probing rather than accusing. Clara's cheeks flushed, but she said nothing, her silence a wall. Dr. Evelyn Marsh, seated near the fire, adjusted her spectacles, her notebook closed, but ever present on her lap. Dr. Marsh is a guest of my wife's cousin, Sir Reginald explained, a physician with a keen mind, fond of puzzles. Dr. Marsh smiled faintly, her demeanor calm but alert. I'm here to enjoy the music, Monsieur Poirot, nothing more, though I did notice Alina seemed unwell during the concert. Poirot's eyes gleamed. You observed this, madame. Tell me more. Dr. Marsh's voice was measured, precise. She was pale, her hands unsteady when she paused for air. I thought it nerves, but now, she trailed off, her gaze flickering to the wine decanter on the sideboard. Poirot nodded, his mind already weaving connections. A physician's eye is valuable, madame. Did you see anything else? Perhaps an exchange between Madame Varkova and another? Dr. Marsh hesitated, then spoke. I saw her speaking with Mr. Trent before the concert, in the corridor near the music room. Their voices were raised, though I couldn't hear the words. Trent's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. A professional disagreement, nothing more. She canceled the joint performance we'd planned. It was an insult, but hardly worth killing over. His tone was defensive, and Poirot's smile was enigmatic. The heart, monsieur, it does not always measure worth as the mind does. Poirot turned to the group, his voice soft but commanding. Let us establish the movements of each of you after Madame Varkova left the stage. Monsieur Hawthorne, Sir Reginald mopped his brow. I was in my study, attending to correspondence. The concert was a triumph, and I wanted to write to a friend in London about it. Poirot nodded. And you, Monsieur Trent? Trent shrugged, his nonchalance strained. I went to my room to practice. I wasn't about to sit around clapping for her encore. Clara spoke next, her voice tight. I walked in the gardens. The night air was refreshing. Dr. Marsh adjusted her spectacles. I was in the library, reading. I find music inspires thought. Each alibi was delivered with varying degrees of conviction, and Poirot's eyes missed none of the subtle tells the way. Sir Reginald's fingers clutched his glass. Trent's averted gaze, Clara's rigid posture, Marsh's deliberate calm. He paced slowly before the fire, his hands clasped behind him. A curious picture emerges. A woman, celebrated and envied, vanishes during her own performance, only to be found dead in a locked attic, poisoned by cyanide. Each of you claims to have been elsewhere, yet none of you saw her leave or return. Most interessant. He paused, his gaze settling on Clara. Mademoiselle, you and Madame Varkova were once close. What caused your parting? Clara's lips tightened, but she answered, her voice barely above a whisper. She chose her career over our bond. I was young, foolish. I thought love could compete with her music. Her eyes glistened, but she blinked back tears, her chin lifting defiantly. Poirot nodded, his expression softening. Love, mademoiselle, it can wound deeply. But does it wound fatally? He turned to Trent. And you, monsieur? A cancelled performance is a blow to pride. Did it stir more than professional rivalry? Trent's jaw clenched. I told you, I'm no murderer. I'd rather outplay her than outwit her in some sordid plot. Poirot's smile was faint. Yet pride, it is a dangerous spark, Nan. To Dr. Marsh, he said, your observations, madame, they are precise. Did you see nothing else? A glance, a gesture, that might illuminate this tragedy. Dr. Marsh's fingers tightened on her notebook. Only what I've told you. Alina seemed distracted, but I thought it was the pressure of performance. Poirot's eyes lingered on her, sensing a mind that saw more than it revealed. Sir Reginald, his patience fraying, interrupted. Monsieur Poirot, surely this is a matter for the police. They'll arrive soon, and we should let them handle this dreadful affair. Poirot's gaze was unwavering. The police, monsieur, they will collect facts. Hercule Poirot, he seeks truth. And the truth, it lies in the shadows of your alibis. As the clock struck 1, the distant sound of a motor car announced the police's arrival. Poirot stepped back, allowing Sir Reginald to take charge. But his mind was already at work, piecing together the fragments of the evening. The lint in his pocket, the scratches on the attic door, the wine glass with its solitary fingerprint sole were notes in a symphony of deceit. He glanced at Hastings, who was scribbling in a notebook, no doubt trying to emulate his friends. Methods? What now? Poirot Hastings whispered. This is a devil of a puzzle. Poirot's eyes twinkled. A puzzle, oui, but one with a solution. We must look beyond the obvious. Hastings. The shadows. They hide the truth, but they also betray the guilty. As the police entered, their heavy boots echoing in the hall, Poirot stood poised, a conductor, ready to unravel the discord that had silenced Madame Varkava's song. Chapter 5. The Hidden Key. The morning sun struggled through the heavy clouds over Blackthorn Manor, casting a pallid light across the moors and into the attic where Madame Alina Varkeva's body had been discovered. Hercule Poirot stood alone in the dusty chamber, the police having completed their initial inspection and removed the body for autopsy. The attic was silent now, save for the faint creak of the floorboards under Poirot's meticulous steps. Captain Hastings, ever faithful, waited at the door, his face a mixture of curiosity and unease. I don't see why you're back here, Poirot, he said, glancing nervously at the chair where Varkova had sat. The police have taken everything: photographs, fingerprints, the lot. What's left to find? Poirot's eyes, sharp as a hawk's, scanned the room. Everything, mon ami, is not always what it seems. The police, they collect what is visible. Hercule Poirot, he seeks what is concealed. He moved to the small table where the wine glass had stood, now removed as evidence, and crouched to examine the floor. The dust, disturbed only by footprints in the heavy boots of the constables, offered no new clues. But Poirot's attention lingered on the doorframe, where he had noted faint scratches the night before. He produced his magnifying glass, its polished lens catching the dim light, and studied the marks closely. They were shallow, irregular, as if made by something slid across the woods, something like a key. Regard as Hastings, he said, beckoning his friend closer. These scratches, they are not random. They suggest a purpose, a method. Hastings peered over his shoulder, frowning. A key, you mean? But the key was inside, with her. You saw it on the floor. Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his mind at work. Oui, I saw it. And that, mon ami, is precisely what troubles me. A key inside a locked room is too convenient, Nan. It invites us to believe the story of a solitary act, but the little gray cells, they whisper otherwise. Poirot rose, dusting his hands with a handkerchief, and turned his attention to the door itself. The lock was old, its iron mechanism worn, but sturdy, designed for the heavy keys, typical of such an ancient manor. He inserted the spare key, provided by Mr. Graves, and tested it. The lock turned smoothly, with a satisfying click, but Poirot's eyes narrowed as he withdrew the key and examined the gap beneath the door. It was narrow, barely a quarter-inch, yet wide enough for a thin object to pass through. He knelt again, his magnifying glass tracing the floor just inside the threshold, and his lips curved into a faint smile. "Aha," he murmured, retrieving a tiny sliver of wood, no larger than a matchstick, caught in the grain of the floorboards. "What's that?" Hastings asked, leaning forward. Poirot held the sliver to the light, his expression one of quiet triumph. "A clue, Hastings. Perhaps the key to the locked room itself." He tucked it into his handkerchief alongside the lint from the previous night, his mind already weaving a theory. Leaving the attic, Poirot sought out Mr. Graves, the butler, who was overseeing the breakfast preparations in the dining room. The man, tall and gaunt with a face as impassive as stone, bowed slightly at Poirot's approach. "Monsieur Poirot, how may I assist you?" Poirot's smile was disarming, his tone gentle. "Monsieur Graves, the keys to the attic, where are they kept?" Graves gestured toward a small cupboard in the servants' corridor, its door locked with a simple latch. "There, sir. The spare keys for the manor's upper rooms are stored in that cupboard. Only the staff have access, though it's rarely locked during the day." Poirot examined the cupboard, noting its accessibility to anyone familiar with the house's routines. "And last night, monsieur, was it locked?" Graves hesitated, his composure faltering. "I cannot be certain, sir. With the concert and the guests, things were hectic. It may have been left open." Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming. "Most interesting. And tell me, did you see anyone near the attic stairs before the tragedy was discovered?" Graves shook his head. "No, sir. I was attending to the guests in the drawing room after the concert. But—" he paused, his brow furrowing. "I did see Mr. Trent in the main hall earlier, near the staircase to the upper floors. He seemed in a hurry, but I thought nothing of it." Poirot's smile widened, though his voice remained soft. "Mercy, Monsieur Graves, your memory, it is most helpful." Returning to the drawing room, Poirot found the guests gathered, their faces drawn from a sleepless night. The police, under the direction of a stolid Inspector Grange, had questioned each briefly and were now combing the grounds for any sign of an intruder. Though Poirot suspected their efforts would prove fruitless, he addressed the group, his tone measured but commanding. "Madame et messieurs, the attic, it was locked from the inside. Yet Madame Varkova did not die by her own hand. Someone arranged this tableau, and I, Hercule Poirot, will uncover how." Clara Beaumont, her eyes red-rimmed, spoke first, her voice sharp. "You're saying one of us did this? That's absurd." "Alina was. She was alone when she left the stage." Poirot's gaze was gentle, but unrelenting. "Alone, mademoiselle? Yet someone knew she would go to the attic. Someone ensured she would not return." Clara flinched, her handkerchief twisting in her hands. Julian Trent, lounging in an armchair with forced ease, scoffed. "You're spinning tales, Poirot. If the door was locked, and the key inside, how could anyone else be involved? Unless you think she let her killer in, then locked the door again." His tone was mocking, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Poirot's response was calm. "The key, monsieur, it is the heart of the matter. It was placed to deceive, but it cannot hide the truth from Hercule Poirot." Dr. Evelyn Marsh, her notebook open once more, watched the exchange with keen interest. "You suspect the lock was tampered with?" she asked, her voice clinical. Poirot inclined his head. "Tampered, perhaps, or manipulated. The scratches on the door frame, they tell a story. And the key, it was not dropped, but placed." Dr. Marsh's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing, her pen poised. Sir Reginald, pacing by the window, turned abruptly. "This is madness, Poirot. My house, a stage for murder. I demand you explain yourself. Poirot raised a hand, his voice soothing but firm. Patience, monsieur. The explanation, it comes when all pieces are in place. For now, I ask only that you remain here, under the watchful eye of Inspector Grange. As the group dispersed, Poirot drew Hastings aside, his voice low. The key, Hastings. It was slipped under the door after the lock was turned. The scratches, the sliver of wood, they betray the method. But the why, the who, that requires more. Hastings frowned, struggling to keep up. So the killer locked her in, then pushed the key back inside. Devilishly clever. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Clever, oui, but not perfect. The lint, the scratches, they are the mistakes of the guilty. He glanced at the staircase, his mind racing. The attic, the key, the wine glass all pointed to a calculated act, staged to mislead. But Poirot's little gray cells were undeterred, already piecing together the shadows of motive and opportunity that would lead him to the truth. Chapter 6. The rivals envied the late morning air in Blackthorn Manor, carried a chill that no fire could dispel, as if the shadow of Madame Elena Varkova's death lingered in the very walls. Hercule Poirot, his overcoat neatly buttoned and his hat tilted precisely, descended the grand staircase with Captain Hastings at his side, his mind a whirl of deductions. The police, under Inspector Grange's methodical direction, were still scouring the manor for physical evidence, but Poirot's focus was narrower, sharper. The key, Hastings, he said, his voice low. It unlocks more than the attic door. It unlocks the heart of the murderer. Hastings, rubbing his hands against the cold, looked puzzled. You're awfully sure it's murder, Poirot. Couldn't it still be suicide? She was a sensitive sort. Artists often are. Poirot's eyes gleamed with quiet certainty. Nan, mon, ami. A woman like Varkova, she lives for her music, not to end it in a dusty attic. The scene, it is staged too perfect, too deliberate. We must now probe the motives, and I begin with Monsieur Trent. Hastings nodded, though his expression betrayed skepticism. Trent's a prickly fellow, I'll grant you, but murder? That's a leap. Poirot led the way to the music room, where Julian Trent had agreed to meet them. The room, still redolent of last night's performance, felt hollow without Varkova's presence. Trent stood by the piano, his lean frame taut as a bowstring, his fingers idly tracing the keys without sound. His dark suit was impeccable, but his eyes, shadowed and restless, betrayed a man under strain. Monsieur Poirot, he said, his voice clipped, I hope this won't take long. I've a train to catch back to London. Poirot's smile was polite, but unyielding. A train, monsieur. Yet a woman lies dead, and the police, they prefer we all remain. Tell me, what was your relationship with Madame Varkova? Trent's lips thinned, and he turned away, feigning interest in a sheet of music on the piano. Professional rivals, nothing more. She had the world's ear. I had my own ambitions. We crossed paths, competed, that's all. Poirot's head tilted, his gaze piercing. And yet, Monsieur Graves saw you near the staircase before her death, in a hurry. And Dr. Marsh spoke of an argument, a heated one. Was it merely professional? This disagreement? Trent's hand froze on the piano, his jaw tightening. She cancelled a duet we were to perform in Vienna. Said my style was incompatible. It was a public slight, but I didn't kill her for it. His voice carried a bitter edge, and Poirot noted the way his fingers clenched, as if restraining a deeper anger, envy. Monsieur Poirot said softly, it is a poison as deadly as cyanide. Did her success gnaw at you? Did you wish to dim her star? Trent spun to face him, his eyes blazing. I'm no Saint Poirot, but I'm no murderer. I'd have outplayed her in time, proved my worth. I didn't need to resort to this. His voice cracked, and Poirot's mustache twitched, sensing a crack in the man's facade. With Sir Reginald's permission, Poirot requested to see Trent's room. The violinist led them grudgingly to a guest chamber on the second floor, its windows overlooking the misty moors. The room was tidy, almost austere, save for a violin case on the bed and a stack of sheet music on a desk, annotated with furious scrawls. Poirot's eyes lingered on a newspaper clipping pinned to the wall, its headline praising Varkova's unrivaled genius. The paper was torn through her name, a jagged wound in the print. "Amemiento?" "Monsieur?" Poirot asked, his tone mild. Trent flushed. A reminder to work harder, nothing more. Poirot nodded, but his attention shifted to the violin case. He opened it with care, revealing a gleaming instrument nestled in velvet. Beneath the violin, tucked into a compartment, was a small glass vial, its contents a faint, crystalline powder. Hastings gasped. "Good heavens, Poirot, is that—" Poirot held up a hand, silencing him, and lifted the vial to the light, his expression grave. "Monsieur Trent, what is this?" Trent's face paled, but he recovered quickly. "It's for cleaning the strings. Residue can be stubborn. Perfectly harmless." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Harmless perhaps, or perhaps not. The police? They will test it. Nan?" Trent's hands twitched, but he said nothing, his silence louder than any protest. Poirot continued his inspection, noting a tweed jacket slung over a chair. He ran his fingers along its hem, pausing at a frayed seam where a few fibers were missing. He compared them mentally to the lint in his pocket, his mind clicking like a metronome. "You were in the attic, monsieur," he said, not as a question but a statement. Trent's eyes widened. "That's absurd. I told you, I was in my room. After the concert." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "The evidence, it speaks louder than words. Fibers, monsieur, they cling where they should not." Leaving Trent's room, Poirot and Hastings returned to the drawing room, where Inspector Grange awaited with preliminary findings. The autopsy confirmed cyanide poisoning, likely administered through the wine, though the bottle's source remained unclear. The glass bore only Varkova's fingerprints, and the attic showed no signs of forced entry. Grange, a burly man with a no-nonsense demeanor, scratched his head. "Looks like a suicide to me, Mr. Poirot, though I'll admit the settings. Odd. Why the attic?" Poirot shook his head. "Suicide, Inspector, is what we are meant to see. But the scratches on the doorframe, the key's placement, they suggest a clever ruse. Someone lured Madame Varkova to the attic, poisoned her, and staged the locked room." Grange frowned, unconvinced, but agreed to test a vial from Trent's room. Poirot, meanwhile, turned Hastings. "Monsieur Trent, he burns with envy. His career, it fades in Varkova's light. But is envy enough to kill? We must dig deeper." As they stepped into the corridor, Poirot paused, his eyes distant. "The vial, the fibers, the argument, these are threads, Hastings. But the motive, it is the needle that binds them. Trent is not alone in his secrets. We must now turn to Mademoiselle Beaumont and the doctor, their shadows, to hold answers." Hastings nodded, his mind racing to keep up with his friends. Relentless logic, as the mystery of the vanishing violinist deepened in the gloom of Blackthorn Manor. Chapter 7. The lover's secret. The mist clung stubbornly to the gardens of Blackthorn Manor, weaving through the rose bushes, enshrouding the stone paths in a veil of mystery that suited Hercule Poirot's contemplative mood. He had requested to speak with Miss Clara Beaumont alone, away from the oppressive atmosphere of the Manor's drawing room, where suspicion hung as heavy as the velvet drapes. Captain Hastings trailed behind, his umbrella raised against the damp, though with his characteristic disdain for inclement weather, walked unprotected, his overcoat pristine, and his mustache unperturbed. "Really, Poirot?" Hastings said, his voice tinged with exasperation. "Must we traipse through the gardens? Couldn't we have questioned her indoors?" Poirot's eyes twinkled, though his expression remained serious. The gardens, mon ami, they offer clarity. Mademoiselle Beaumont, she guards her heart closely. Here, among the roses, she may let slip what the walls of the manor conceal. Hastings muttered something about catching a cold, but followed. His loyalty to Poirot's methods unwavering despite his grumbling. Clara Beaumont awaited them by a stone bench beneath, a trellis laden with late-blooming roses, their petals drooping under the weight of the mist. She wore a dark green coat, its collar turned up against the chill, and her auburn curls were tucked beneath a cloche hat, giving her the air of a figure from a melancholy painting. Her face, pale and composed, betrayed no emotion as Poirot approached, though her hands, clasped tightly in her lap, hinted at an inner turmoil. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice cool but polite, "you wished to see me. I trust this will be brief." Poirot bowed slightly, his manner courteous but probing. "Mademoiselle, I seek only the truth, and you, I believe, hold a piece of it. Your connection to Madame Varkova, it was more than friendship, Nan." Clara's eyes flickered, a storm passing through their blue depths, but she held his gaze. "I told you, we were close once. It ended. There's nothing more to say." Poirot seated himself on the bench, gesturing for Hastings to remain standing, a silent sentinel. "Yet, mademoiselle, the heart does not forget so easily. You loved her, did you not? And love, when it turns to pain, can breed dark thoughts." Clara's lips parted, a sharp intake of breath betraying her composure. "You presume too much, Monsieur Poirot." "Yes, I loved Alina. She was everything. Her music, her passion, it consumed me. But she chose her violin over me, her fame over our future. I was hurt, yes, but I didn't kill her." Poirot's gaze softened, but his questions were relentless. "You were in the gardens last night, you said, when Madame Varkova vanished. Yet the gardener, he saw you only briefly, near the terrace. Where did you go afterward?" Clara's fingers tightened, her knuckles whitening. "I wandered the paths, alone. I needed air, space, to think. Elena's performance, it stirred memories I'd rather forget." Poirot leaned forward, his voice gentle but incisive. "Memories, mademoiselle, or regrets? Did you see her after she left the stage? Did you follow her, perhaps to the attic?" Clara's eyes widened, a flash of fear crossing her face before she masked it with indignation. "Follow her? No. I stayed outside until the scream. I had no reason to go to the attic." Her voice trembled, and Poirot noted the way her hand moved to her coat pocket, as if guarding something within. He rose, pacing slowly along the path, his hands clasped behind his back. "Curio, mademoiselle, your handkerchief, it bears a stain wine, perhaps, like that found in the attic. How did it come to be so?" Clara froze, then drew the handkerchief from her pocket, its lace edge indeed marked with a faint reddish smear. I must have spilled some wine at dinner. It's nothing." But her voice faltered, and Poirot's eyes gleamed with quiet triumph. "Perhaps," he said, "but the little gray cells, they are not convinced. Tell me, mademoiselle, did you speak with Madame Varkova before the concert?" A moment, perhaps, that reignited old wounds. Clara's composure cracked, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Yes," she whispered. "I saw her in the corridor before she went on stage. I begged her to talk, to explain why she cast me aside. She said she had no time, that her music was her life now. It broke me all over again." Poirot nodded, his expression one of sympathy, tempered by calculation. "And so you walked the gardens, nursing this pain. Yet no one can fully confirm your movements. A dangerous gap, mademoiselle, in a house where murder has been done." Clara stood abruptly, her voice rising. "I loved her, Monsieur Poirot. I could never harm her. You must believe me." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Belief, mademoiselle, it comes with proof. And proof I shall find. As they returned to the manor, Hastings whispered, "She's hiding something, Poirot. But murder, she seems too heartbroken." Poirot's eyes were distant, his mind weaving the threads of the case. The heart, Hastings, it can deceive, as well as it loves. Mademoiselle Beaumont's tears, they are genuine, but tears can mask guilt as well as grief. We must now consider her handkerchief, her solitude in the gardens, and her meeting with Varkova. They are pieces of the puzzle, but not yet the picture. Back in the drawing room, Poirot sought out Inspector Grange, who was reviewing notes with a constable. The vial from Trent's room had been sent for analysis, but preliminary tests suggested it was indeed cyanide, though Trent's claim of its use for cleaning strings was being investigated. A musician's trick, perhaps, Grange said, skeptical. But it's damning, Mr. Poirot. Poirot nodded, his thoughts elsewhere. Damning, oui, but too obvious, perhaps. The murderer, he wishes us to look at Monsieur Trent. We must look beyond. Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice low. Mademoiselle Beaumont's pain, it is real, but her story, it has gaps. The stain on her handkerchief, the vagueness of her alibi, these are shadows we must illuminate. And yet, I wonder, is her grief a motive or a mask? Hastings frowned, struggling to follow. You think she's involved, then? Or is it Trent, with his vial and his envy? Poirot's smile was faint. Both, neither, or another. The truth, Hastings, it hides in the spaces between their words. We must now turn to Dr. Marsh, whose silence speaks as loudly as Clara's tears. As the manor's clock chimed noon, Poirot stood by the window, gazing at the mist-shrouded moors. The lover's secret, like the key in the attic, was a clue, but not the solution. The little gray cells were restless, sensing the pattern emerging, yet knowing that one more piece was needed to unravel the tragedy of the vanishing violinist. Chapter 8. The Doctor's Observation. The library of Blackthorn Manor was a haven of quiet, its shelves heavy with leather-bound volumes that exuded the faint scent of aged paper and polish. The room bathed in the muted light filtering through. Tall, leaded windows seemed a fitting stage for Hercule Poirot's next inquiry. He had requested a private audience with Dr. Evelyn Marsh, whose keen observations and reserved demeanor intrigued him as much as the more overt passions of Clara Beaumont and Julian Trent. Captain Hastings, ever the faithful shadow, stood by, a globe in the corner, his fingers tracing its contours, absent-mindedly. "I say, Poirot," he ventured, "this Dr. Marsh seems an odd fish, always scribbling in that notebook, but so quiet. Do you think she's hiding something?" Poirot, adjusting his cuffs with precision, fixed his friend with a knowing glance. "The quiet ones, mon ami, they are often the most revealing," Dr. Marsh observes. "She analyzes, and her notebook it is a window to her thoughts. We shall see what secrets it holds." He gestured to the door as Dr. Marsh entered, her gray gown as understated as her manner, her spectacles glinting in the dim light. She carried her notebook, its pages well worn, and her expression was one of polite curiosity, tempered by a wariness Poirot noted at once. "Dr. Marsh," Poirot began, his voice smooth as velvet, "you have been most helpful with your medical expertise, confirming the cyanide that ended Madame Varkeva's life, but I am interested in your other observations. You see much, Nan?" Dr. Marsh settled into a leather armchair, her posture erect, her hands resting lightly on her notebook. "I observe as a habit, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice calm, but precise. "A physician must notice details, symptoms, behaviors. It's second nature." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his mind's quickening. "And last night, during the concert, what did your physician's eye notice? You mentioned Madame Varkeva's pallor, her unsteady hands. But was there more? A glance? A gesture? Among the guests, perhaps?" Dr. Marsh's fingers tightened briefly on her notebook, a subtle tell that Poirot's sharp eyes did not miss. "I saw what I told you," she replied, her tone measured. "Alina argued with Mr. Trent before the concert, in the corridor near the music room. Their voices were sharp, though I couldn't make out the words. Later, during her pause for air, I noticed her agitation seemed greater than mere nerves." Poirot leaned forward, his eyes piercing. "And the guests, Madame, did you observe their reactions when Madame Varkova failed to return for her bow?" Dr. Marsh hesitated, her gaze flickering to the window, as if seeking clarity in the mist. Beyond, Miss Beaumont was withdrawn, staring at the stage as if lost in thought. Mr. Trent seemed restless, his fingers twitching as if eager to leave. Sir Reginald was flustered, trying to keep the guests calm. I stayed in my seat, watching, noting their behaviors. Poirot nodded, his hands steepled. "You note much, Dr. Marsh. Your notebook, it is a record of these observations." She clutched the book closer, a faint flush rising to her cheeks. "It's a personal habit, Monsieur Poirot. I jot down thoughts, impressions, nothing more." Poirot's smile was disarming. "May I see it, s'il vous plaît? A mind as analytical as yours, it may hold a clue we have overlooked." Dr. Marsh's composure wavered, but she opened the notebook, revealing pages filled with neat, precise handwriting. Poirot scanned them quickly, his eyes catching phrases: "EV pale, hands trembling, JT tense, argumentative, CB distant, emotional." One entry, dated the evening of the concert, read, "EV glanced at CB before leaving." Poirot's eyebrow rose. "You saw this glance, Madame. What did it tell you?" Dr. Marsh adjusted her spectacles, her voice steady, but guarded. It was brief, almost imperceptible. "I thought it might be regret, or perhaps an acknowledgement of their past. I can't be certain." Poirot nodded, returning the notebook. "Your uncertainty, it is honest, and honesty is rare in a house of secrets. Tell me, where were you after the concert, when Madame Varkova vanished?" Dr. Marsh met his gaze squarely. "In the library, reading. I find music stirs the mind, and I wanted to reflect on the performance." Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. "The book, Madame, what was it?" She hesitated, then named a medical journal, its title obscure. Poirot made a mental note to check the library later, suspecting the journal's pages might reveal whether her alibi held. He paced slowly before the fireplace, his hands clasped behind him. "You are a physician, Dr. Marsh. You know poisons, their effects. Cyanide, it is swift, precise. Would you know how to procure it? Perhaps from a household source?" Dr. Marsh's lips tightened, but her voice remained calm. "Cyanide can be found in certain pesticides, or even in a chemist's supplies, though it's tightly controlled. As a doctor, I have access to many substances, but I assure you, I had no part in this." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "I accuse no one, Madame. I merely seek to understand." As Dr. Marsh rose to leave, Poirot stopped her with a gentle question. "One thing more. Did you see anyone near the attic stairs, or perhaps handling a wine bottle, before the tragedy?" She paused, her hand on the door. "I saw Mr. Trent in the main hall, as I told you, and I noticed a servant carrying a tray with wine to the upper floors, but I thought it was for the guest rooms." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Mercy, Dr. Marsh. Your observations, they are most illuminating." Once she had gone, Hastings shook his head. "She's sharp, Poirot, but I can't see her as a killer. Too composed, too academic." Poirot's expression was thoughtful. "The composed mind, Hastings, it can be the most dangerous. Her notebook, her silence, they suggest a woman who sees more than she says. We must verify her alibi, and we must learn more of this servant with the wine." Poirot led the way to the library's reading nook, where a stack of journals lay on a table. He found the one Dr. Marsh had named, its pages pristine, unturned. Curio, he murmured. She claims to have read, yet the journal, it is untouched. A small lie, perhaps, but why? Hastings frowned. You think she was elsewhere? Near the attic, maybe? Poirot's smile was faint. Perhaps, mon ami. Or perhaps she saw something she does not yet wish to share. As they returned to the drawing room, Inspector Grange approached, his face grim. The vial from Trent's room was confirmed to contain cyanide, though in a diluted form, possibly consistent with his claim of cleaning strings. Still suspicious, Grange said, but not conclusive. Poirot nodded, his mind elsewhere. The cyanide, it is but one piece. The wine, the servant, the glance between Varkova and Clara, these are the notes of our symphony. We must play them carefully, Hastings, to find the melody of murder. Standing by the window, Poirot gazed at the moors, their secrets hidden in the mist. Dr. Marsh's observations, like Clara's tears and Trent's envy, were threads in a tapestry of deceit. The little gray cells were restless, sensing the truth, drawing closer, yet knowing one more shadow must be pierced to unravel the mystery of the vanishing violinist. Chapter 9. The lynx tail. The afternoon light filtered weakly through the heavy drapes of Blackthorn Manor, casting long shadows across the polished floors of the drawing room where Hercule Poirot stood, his small frame a study in quiet intensity. The air was thick with the scent of beeswax and the lingering unease of the previous night's tragedy. Captain Hastings, ever restless, paced near the fireplace, his brow furrowed as he tried to piece together the fragments of the case. I say, Poirot, he ventured, we've got Trent with his vial of cyanide, Clara with her stained handkerchief, and Dr. Marsh with her dodgy alibi. It's a tangle, isn't it? Where do we go from here? Poirot's eyes, bright and unyielding, flickered with the spark of a mind at work. We return, mon ami, to the smallest of clues, for it is often the smallest that speaks the loudest. The lint, Hastings, it is a whisper from the attic, and today it will tell its tale. He produced the handkerchief from his pocket, unfolding it with care, to reveal the tiny piece of lint he had retrieved from the attic floor. In the light, it appeared unremarkably grayish thread, frayed and unassuming, but to Poirot it was a beacon. He led Hastings to the study, a smaller room lined with mahogany shelves and a desk cluttered with Sir Reginald's papers. There, Poirot requested the presence of Mr. Graves, the butler, whose gaunt figure appeared promptly, his demeanor as composed as ever. Monsieur Graves, Poirot began, his voice smooth but probing. The attic, it is rarely used. Yet the lint I found there, it is not of dust or cobwebs. It is fabric, fresh. Tell me, who has access to cleaning supplies or gardening materials in the manor? Graves's eyes narrowed slightly, but he answered with precision. The attic is used for storage, sir, linens and old furniture mostly. The staff clean it once a month, but not recently. As for gardening supplies, they are kept in a shed near the stables, locked, but the key hangs in the servants' pantry. Anyone could take it, I suppose. Poirot nodded, his mind clicking like a well-oiled lock. And the wine served last night, where was it stored? Graves gestured toward the cellar. The wine for the guests came from the main cellar, sir, but there's a smaller stock in the pantry for daily use. A bottle was sent up for Madame Varkova, at her request, before the concert. Poirot's mustache twitched. At her request. Most interesting. Who delivered it? Graves hesitated, then said Elsie, the maid who found her. She took a tray with a bottle and glass to Madame's room, but I don't know if it was used. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Merci, Monsieur Graves. You have been most helpful. Poirot and Hastings descended to the servants' pantry, a cramped space filled with the clatter of pots and the scent of herbs. Elsie, her face still pale from the previous night's shock, was polishing silver, her hands trembling slightly. Poirot's approach was gentle, his voice soothing. Mademoiselle Elsie, you performed a great service last night, finding Madame Varkova. Tell me of this wine you brought her. When and where? Elsie's eyes darted nervously. It was before the concert, sir, about 7. She sent word she wanted a bottle of claret in her room to settle her nerves. I took it up, left it on her dressing table with a glass. I didn't see her drink it though. Poirot's gaze was steady. And the bottle, it was sealed. Elsie nodded. Yes, sir, fresh from the pantry. I opened it myself, poured a bit to check it wasn't corked, then left it. Poirot's mind raced. The wine in the attic, half drunk, bore Varkova's fingerprints alone. Yet the bottle's origin was now a thread to follow. He thanked Elsie and led Hastings back to the attic, determined to revisit the scene with fresh eyes. The room was as they had left it, the chair empty, the lamp extinguished, but Poirot's focus was on the lint. He knelt by the table, producing his magnifying glass, and compared the thread to the sliver of wood from the doorframe. Regard us, Hastings, he said, his voice low. The lint, it is tweed gray, tightly woven, and the wood, it suggests the key was manipulated, perhaps slid under the door. Hastings frowned, struggling to keep up. You think someone locked the door, then pushed the key back inside? But how does the lint fit? Poirot's smile was faint. It fits mon ami, because it does not belong. The attic is dusty, untouched, yet this lint is fresh, from a garment worn recently. We must find its source. Returning to the guest wing, Poirot requested to re-examine Julian Trent's belongings, with Inspector Grange's approval. Trent, summoned to his room, stood by with a scowl as Poirot inspected the tweed jacket from the previous day. The hem, frayed at one seam, matched the lint's texture under the magnifying glass. Monsieur Trent, Poirot said, holding up the jacket, this lint, it was found in the attic. How did it come to be there, when you claim you never entered? Trent's face flushed, his voice sharp. That's nonsense, Poirot. I was in my room, practicing, as I told you. That lint could have come from anywhere, servants, guests, anyone. But his eyes betrayed a flicker of panic, and Poirot's smile was unrelenting. Anywhere, monsieur. Yet it matches your jacket precisely. A coincidence, perhaps, but Hercule Poirot, he does not believe in coincidences. Leaving Trent's room, Poirot conferred with Inspector Grange, who had received a report on the wine bottle. It was from the manor's cellar, a claret matching the glass in the attic, but no traces of cyanide were found in the remaining contents. Odd, Grange mused. If the poison was in the wine, it was added after it was poured. Poirot nodded, his mind turning to Elsie's account. The glass, Inspector, it is the key. Only Varkova's prints were found, yet someone placed the poison. We must consider how. In the drawing room, Poirot gathered his thoughts, his eyes distant. Clara's stained handkerchief, Trent's lint, Dr. Marsh's unturned journal, and now the wine, all were pieces of a puzzle, but the motive remained elusive. Hastings, he said, the lint places Trent in the attic, yet he denies it. Clara's grief, it is real, but her alibi is weak. Dr. Marsh sees all, yet says little. And the wine, it was tampered with, but by whom? The little gray cells. They are close to the truth. Hastings shook his head, bewildered. It's a devil of a mess, Poirot. Trent seems the likely culprit, with that vial, and now the lint. But what about Clara, or even Sir Reginald? He could have slipped something into the wine. Poirot's eyes twinkled. All are possible, mon ami, but the lint, it sings of Trent's presence. We must now weave these threads into a pattern. The next step, it is to confront the lies and uncover the hand that poured the poison. As the manor's clock chimed 3, Poirot stood by the window, the lint's tail, a silent accusation in his pocket. The mystery of the vanishing violinist was drawing closer to its resolution. But the shadows of Blackthorn Manor still held their secrets tight. Chapter 10. The Poisoned Chalice. The grand music room of Blackthorn Manor, where Madame Alina Varkova's violin had sung its final notes, was now a stage for a different performance. Hercule Poirot had gathered the household: Sir Reginald Hawthorne, Julian Trent, Clara Beaumont, Dr. Evelyn Marsh, and the key servants, including Mr. Graves and Elsie, under the watchful eye of Inspector Grange. The candelabras, still lit from the previous evening, cast a flickering glow across the faces of the assembled, each marked by a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. Captain Hastings stood near the door, his notebook open, though his scribbles were more a gesture of habit than insight. "This is it, Poirot," he whispered, his voice tinged with anticipation. "You're going to name the killer, aren't you?" Poirot's eyes, bright as polished jet, surveyed the room. "Not yet, mon ami," he replied softly. "But the truth, it emerges like a melody from discord. Today, we shall play the final notes." He stepped forward, his small frame commanding the space, his hands clasped behind his back. "Madame et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and measured. "A crime has been committed in this house, a crime of cunning, of envy, of careful design. Madame Varkova, a woman of genius, was silenced in a locked attic, poisoned by cyanide in a glass of wine. But how, and by whom? Let us unravel the mystery." He paced slowly before the stage, his gaze sweeping over the guests. "We begin with the scene. The attic, locked from the inside, the key on the floor, the wine glass with Madame's fingerprints alone. It appears a suicide, Nan. But Hercule Poirot, he does not accept the obvious. The scratches on the doorframe, the sliver of wood. They tell us the key was slipped under the door after the lock was turned, creating the illusion of a sealed room. A clever trick, but not perfect." Sir Reginald, his face flushed, interrupted. "Monsieur Poirot, this is preposterous. No one could have entered that attic without being seen." Poirot's smile was gentle but firm. "Patience, monsieur. The evidence, it speaks. Let us consider the wine. Elsie, the maid, brought a bottle of claret to Madame Varkova's room before the concert, at her request. Yet the glass in the attic, it contained cyanide, and the bottle, it was clean. The poison was added to the glass alone, by someone who knew Madame would drink. Clara Beaumont, her hands clasped tightly, spoke up, her voice trembling. But why the attic? Why would Alina go there, of all places?" Poirot turned to her, his eyes softening. "A question most pertinent, mademoiselle. She was lured, I believe, under a pretext perhaps, a promise of reconciliation, or a discussion of music. Someone she trusted, or at least did not fear, led her to that dusty chamber." Poirot's gaze shifted to Julian Trent, whose lean frame was rigid, his eyes fixed on the floor. "Monsieur Trent, you had motive envy, burning like a fire. Madame Varkova's star eclipsed yours, and her cancellation of your joint performance in Vienna was a public humiliation. In your room, we found a vial of cyanide, and the lint from your tweed jacket. It was in the attic, where you claim you never went." Trent's head snapped up, his voice sharp. "I told you, that vial was for cleaning strings. And the lint, it could have come from anywhere. You've no proof I was there." Poirot raised a hand, his tone calm, but unyielding. "The lint, monsieur, it matches your jacket precisely, and the scratches on the doorframe, they align with the key's manipulation. You were in the attic, and you arranged the scene to deceive." Trent's face paled, but he held his ground, his lips pressed into a thin line. Poirot turned to Clara. "Mademoiselle Beaumont, your love for Madame Varkova turned to pain when she chose her music over you. Your handkerchief, stained with wine, suggests a connection to the attic, yet your tears, they speak of grief, not guilt. You met her before the concert, begging for answers, but she turned you away. Did this rejection drive you to a darker act?" Clara's eyes filled with tears, her voice breaking. "No, Monsieur Poirot. I loved her, even after everything. I could never hurt her." To Dr. Marsh, Poirot said, "Madame, your observations are keen, yet your alibi is weak. The journal you claimed to read lies untouched in the library. Were you elsewhere, perhaps witnessing more than you admit?" Dr. Marsh adjusted her spectacles, her voice steady. "I was in the library, Monsieur Poirot, reflecting, not reading. I saw nothing of the crime, only the tensions before it." Poirot paused, his eyes sweeping the room. "Let us reconstruct the evening." Madame Varkova pauses her performance, claiming a need for air. She is lured to the attic by a note, perhaps, or a whispered promise. There, she is offered wine, laced with cyanide from a source easily accessed, a gardening shed, where such poisons are kept. She drinks, she dies, and the killer locks the door, sliding the key beneath to create the locked room illusion. The lint, the scratches, they betray the presence of Monsieur Trent. Trent leaped to his feet, his voice rising. "This is madness. You've no evidence, only guesses." Poirot's smile was serene. "Guesses, Monsieur Nan, the little gray cells, they see clearly. You argued with Madame Varkova over the cancelled duet. Your pride, it could not bear her triumph. You knew her habits, her request for wine. You took the glass from her room, added the cyanide, and lured her to the attic under the guise of a musical discussion. You staged the scene, but you could not erase the lint from your jacket." Sir Reginald, his face ashen, stammered, "But why, Trent? She was a guest in my home." Poirot's gaze was steady. "Envy, monsieur. It is a poison as deadly as cyanide." Monsieur Trent saw his career fading, while Madame Varkova's soared. He could not outplay her, so he silenced her. Dr. Marsh spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "And the wine? How did he ensure only she drank it?" Poirot nodded, acknowledging her sharpness. "The glass, madame, was taken from her room, poisoned, and placed in the attic. The bottle, it was a decoy, left clean to confuse. Only her fingerprints were needed to complete the illusion. Clara's voice was a whisper. And my handkerchief, you thought." Poirot's expression softened. "Your stain, mademoiselle, it was from tears, not wine. You mourned her in the garden, alone, as you said. Your grief, it is real." Clara buried her face in her hands, sobbing quietly. Poirot turned to Inspector Grange. "The vial, the lint, the scratches, they point to Monsieur Trent. I recommend a thorough search of his belongings for the note that lured Madame Varkova, and a test of the gardening shed's supplies for cyanide." Grange nodded, his skepticism replaced by grudging respect. "We'll do it, Mr. Poirot. If you're right, we'll have him." As the guests dispersed, Poirot stood by the piano, his eyes distant. "The chalice of poison, Hastings," he said softly. "It is not only the wine, but the envy that filled it. The truth, it is now clear." Hastings, shaking his head in awe, murmured, "You've done it again, Poirot. But how do you always see what we miss?" Poirot's smile was faint. "The little gray cells, mon ami, they listen where others only hear." Chapter 11. The confession. The atmosphere in Blackthorn Manor's drawing room was taut as a violin string, the weight of Hercule Poirot's revelations settling over the gathered company like a fog. The fire in the hearth crackled, its warmth doing little to dispel the chill of suspicion that clung to the air. Julian Trent stood near the window, his lean frame rigid, his face a mask of defiance that faltered under the steady gaze of Poirot's piercing eyes. Sir Reginald Hawthorne, his hands clasped tightly behind him, paced restlessly, while Clara Beaumont sat with her head bowed, her handkerchief pressed to her lips. Dr. Evelyn Marsh, her notebook closed for once, observed the scene with clinical detachment, though her spectacles glinted with a flicker of anticipation. Inspector Grange, flanked by 2 constables, stood ready, his notebook open, his expression a mix of skepticism and growing conviction. Captain Hastings, ever loyal, hovered near Poirot, his eyes wide with the thrill of the denouement. Poirot stepped forward, his small stature commanding the room as if he were a maestro before an orchestra. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, his voice clear and resonant, we have reached the crescendo of this tragedy. Madame Elena Varkova, a woman of unparalleled talent, was struck down by a poison not only of cyanide, but of envy. The locked attic, the wine glass, the key were all part of a performance, staged to deceive. But Hercule Poirot, he sees through the curtain of lies. He turned to Julian Trent, whose fingers twitched as if longing for his violin. Monsieur Trent, you have denied your presence in the attic, yet the lint from your tweed jacket betrays you. The scratches on the door frame, the sliver of wood, they confirmed the key was slipped beneath the door. A ruse to create the illusion of a sealed room. And the vial of cyanide in your possession, though you claim it for cleaning strings, is too convenient a coincidence. You lured Madame Varkova to the attic, under the pretext of discussing your cancelled duet, and there you offered her the poisoned wine. Trent's face contorted, his voice rising in a desperate crescendo. This is absurd, Poirot. You've built a castle of guesses on a speck of lint. I was in my room, practicing, as I told you. You've no proof I touched that wine or set foot in the attic. His eyes darted to the door, as if calculating the distance to freedom. But the constable's presence held him in place. Poirot's smile was serene, his hands steepled before him. Proof, monsieur. The little grey cells, they assemble the proof. Let us consider the sequence. Madame Varkova paused her performance, claiming a need for air. You, knowing her habits, sent a note perhaps slipped under her door requesting a meeting in the attic, a place quiet and private, where you could speak of music. She trusted you enough to go, carrying the glass of wine from her room, which you had already laced with cyanide from the gardening shed. You locked the door behind her, slid the key beneath, and left, believing your crime perfect. Clara Beaumont's voice broke the silence, a soft sob escaping her. Elena, she would never have gone to the attic for a trivial reason. She loved her music too much. Poirot nodded, his gaze softening. Precisement, mademoiselle. She went because she believed the meeting was important. Reconciliation, perhaps, or a professional matter. Monsieur Trent, he knew how to play on her passions. Trent's composure shattered, his voice a raw shout. Enough. You twist everything, Poirot. Yes, I envied her, her fame, her adulation, her effortless genius. She took everything from me, my career, my pride, my future. That duet in Vienna, it was my chance to shine, and she threw it away like I was nothing. His hands clenched into fists, his face flushed with a rage he could no longer contain. I wanted her to feel what I felt: humiliation, failure. So yes, I sent the note. I poured the cyanide into her glass when I fetched it from her room. I watched her drink, watched her fall, and I felt nothing but relief. The room fell silent, the confession hanging like a discordant note. Clara buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. Sir Reginald staggered, clutching the back of a chair, his voice hoarse. My God, Trent, in my house. You brought this horror to my home. Dr. Marsh's expression remained impassive, though her eyes flicked to her notebook, as if tempted to record the moment. Inspector Grange stepped forward, his tone gruff. Julian Trent, you're under arrest for the murder of Elena Varkova. You'll come with us. As the constables moved to restrain him, Trent's defiance crumbled, his shoulders slumping. She deserved it, he muttered, almost to himself. She took everything. Poirot shook his head, his voice low but firm. Non, monsieur. You took her life, and in doing so, you have lost your own. The envy, it consumed you, not her. Grange turned to Poirot, his skepticism replaced by grudging admiration. You've done it, Mr. Poirot. The lint, the scratches, it all fits. We'll search his room for that note, and the shed for the cyanide source. you've saved us a deal of trouble? Poirot inclined his head, his expression modest. The truth, Inspector, it is its own reward. But I recommend you also examine the servants' pantry, where the wine was stored. Monsieur Trent, he had opportunity to tamper there as Trent was led away, his head bowed. The room seemed to exhale. Clara rose, her face pale but resolute, and approached Poirot. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. I thought I hated her, but I only wanted her to see me again. You've given her justice. Poirot's eyes were kind. Mademoiselle, your love. It was true, even in its pain. Go now, and find peace. Dr. Marsh stood, her notebook tucked under her arm. A remarkable deduction, Monsieur Poirot. I confess, I suspected Trent, but I lacked your clarity. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Your observations, madame, they aided me. The glance you noted between Madame Varkova and Mademoiselle Beaumont, it told me her heart was not the motive. Your notebook, it was a guide. Sir Reginald, still shaken, offered Poirot a glass of brandy, which he declined with a polite wave. Monsieur Poirot, I cannot thank you enough. This scandal, it will haunt Blackthorn, but at least the truth is known. Poirot bowed slightly. The truth, monsieur, it heals as much as it wounds. As the group dispersed, Hastings clapped Poirot on the shoulder, his face alight with awe. By Jove, Poirot, you've outdone yourself. That lintit was the key all along. Poirot's mustache twitched, his eyes twinkling. The lint, oui, but also the heart, Hastings. Envy, it is a poison that destroys the giver as much as the receiver. Come, let us prepare to leave this place of shadows. The confession had closed the case, but as Poirot stepped toward the door, his mind lingered on the violin, silent now in the attic. Its strings a mute testament to the tragedy of envy that had silenced its mistress. Chapter 12. The final note, the mist that had cloaked Blackthorn. Manor for days began to lift as the afternoon sun broke through, casting a pale golden light across the Yorkshire moors. Inside the manor, the air remained heavy with the aftershocks of Julian Trent's confession, but a sense of resolution settled over the household. Fragile as the first notes of a requiem, Hercule Poirot stood by the music-room's tall windows, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes tracing the rolling hills beyond. The room, once alive with Madame Alina Varkova's music, now felt like a silent shrine, its candelabras dimmed, the stage empty. Captain Hastings, ever at his side, adjusted his tie, his face a mixture of relief and awe. Well, Poirot, he said, his voice low, you've done it again. Trent's in custody, the case is closed, and yet, it feels a bit hollow, doesn't it? Poor Varkova. Poirot's mustache twitched, his expression pensive. Oui, mon ami, it is a tragedy. A woman of such genius, silenced by the pettiness of envy. But justice, it is a melody that must be played, even when the notes are mournful. He turned from the window, his gaze sweeping the room where the drama had begun, his mind still turning over the details, ensuring no thread remained unknotted. Inspector Grange entered, his heavy boots echoing on the polished floor. His gruff demeanor had softened, replaced by a grudging respect for the little Belgian detective. Mr. Poirot, he said, tipping his hat, we found the note in Trent's room. Just as you thought, a scribbled invitation to Var, asking her to meet in the attic to discuss a matter of mutual benefit. And the gardening shed had a tin of cyanide-based pesticide, half empty. It's enough to seal his fate. Poirot nodded, his eyes distant. The pieces, they fit, Inspector. The note, the lint, the scratches, all tell the story of a man consumed by his own inadequacy. Grange hesitated, then added, You've a knack for this, sir. I'll admit, I thought it was suicide at first. You've saved us a muddle. Poirot's smile was modest. The truth, Inspector, it is like a violin string, it must be tuned with care, or the music is discord. I merely listened. As Grange departed to finalize his report, Clara Beaumont approached, her auburn curls loose now, her face pale but composed. Her eyes, still shadowed by grief, met Poirot's with a quiet gratitude. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands, "I thought I'd never find peace after Elena's death. I blamed myself, you know, for not stopping her, for not being enough. Your work, it's given me a chance to heal." Poirot bowed slightly, his expression kind. "Mademoiselle, your love for her, it was pure, even in its pain. Carry it with you, but let it not weigh you down." Clara nodded, a tear escaping, which she brushed away with her unstained handkerchief. "I'll try," she whispered, then turned to leave, her steps lighter than they had been since the tragedy. Poirot watched her go, his thoughts lingering on the fragility of the human heart. Dr. Evelyn Marsh, lingering near the piano, approached next, her notebook tucked under her arm. "Monsieur Poirot, your method is remarkable," she said, her voice crisp but warm. "I confess, I tried to solve it myself, but I missed the lint, the scratches. You've taught me the value of the smallest detail." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Madame, your observations were a guide. Your note about the glance between Madame Varkova and Mademoiselle Beaumont, it showed me the path was not one of love, turned to hate, but of envy, turned to murder." Sir Reginald Hawthorne, his florid face still marked by shock, joined them, his hands clasped, as if in supplication. "Monsieur Poirot, I cannot express my gratitude. This scandal will linger, but you've spared my house further disgrace by finding the truth so swiftly." Poirot inclined his head. "Monsieur, your love of music brought beauty to this place, but also its shadow. Let this be a lesson genius. It attracts both adoration and destruction." As the guests prepared to depart, Poirot and Hastings walked to the Manor's entrance, where their motor car awaited to return them to London. The moors stretched endlessly before them, their wild beauty a stark contrast to the calculated cruelty within the Manor's walls. Hastings, pulling his coat tighter against the breeze, sighed. "It's a sad business, Poirot. Varkova's music, it was something special. To think it's gone forever because of Trent's jealousy." Poirot's gaze was distant, his voice soft. "Wee Hastings, but her music, it lives in those who heard it. The violin is silent, but its echo remains. And justice, it sings its own song, one that restores order to chaos." He adjusted his hat, his movements precise, and stepped toward the car. "Come, mon ami. London awaits, and the little gray cells, they crave a new puzzle." As the car wound through the moors, the silhouette of Blackthorn Manor faded into the mist, its secrets laid bare by Poirot's relentless logic. The case of the vanishing violinist was closed, but its final note a lament for genius lost and justice foundling in the air, as haunting as Varkova's last performance.